Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the session. My name is David Antonioli. I'm a strategic advisor in the climate change space, and I'm delighted to be moderating the session today. If you rewind the clock back a little bit, back in Dubai in COP28, there was a number of announcements regarding the carbon markets in general, but the voluntary carbon market in particular. There were some pretty big announcements from some pretty influential people like John Kerry throwing their weight behind the carbon markets. There was also a really important announcement about an end-to-end integrity platform that's sponsored or put together by the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets, the Voluntary Carbon Markets Integrity Initiative, the Science-Based Targets, meant to kind of provide some more confidence in the supply chain on carbon credits. And then the other one, which we're going to talk about today, was that the world's largest greenhouse gas crediting programs, and excuse me here for being picky here, but I know the session said registries. I like to refer to them as greenhouse gas programs because it's more than just having a registry, but I'll be referring to them as greenhouse gas crediting programs. But the largest ones signed an agreement to collectively increase the impact of their activities, to support host countries in their work to achieve their NDCs, to foster innovation, to promote knowledge exchange, and to facilitate the dissemination of best practices. So this collaboration is not new. Some of the programs have already worked in the past together to collaborate, oftentimes behind the scene. When I ran Verra, we did a lot of collaboration with the Climate Action Reserve on setting out rules on standardized methods. We worked with the gold standard to figure out when to stop crediting renewable energies. But this seems different. This is now a very public commitment to collaborate. And of course, the question before all of us here is, what does this all mean, and where is this going to go? So we have a delightful and wonderful panel. I don't think we could have imagined a better panel to talk about this. We have Craig Ebert, the president of the Climate Action Reserve. We have Mary Grady, who's the president and CEO of Environmental Resources Trust, which manages two of the larger programs, the American Carbon Registry and the Architecture for REDD+ Transactions, ART. Sarah Leugers, who's the chief growth officer at the Gold Standard. And Toby Janson-Smith, who's the Chief Program Development and Innovation Officer at Verra. So they are really, I think, particularly well equipped to speak to this question about what does this all mean. So I'll start off with some questions, and I certainly want to encourage everybody to be thinking about questions that we want to take up later on. But Craig, I'll start off with you. So the programs have in the past collaborated. But oftentimes, kind of behind the scenes and under kind of no formal obligation. But this is different. Why was there a need or even a desire to set out a public statement setting out the collaboration amongst the greenhouse gas programs?
Well, thanks, David. As you've noticed, we have collaborated on an ad hoc basis in the past, but anyone who's been monitoring, the global voluntary carbon market the last few years realizes there's a number of things in play here, which is that, one, we need to scale and scale as quickly as possible. And I don't mean just the registry programs, the carbon crediting programs. The entire market needs to scale to solve this problem. And for a variety of reasons, we're not scaling fast enough. Part of it are the criticisms being leveled against the quality of credits out there. And a lot of that is, frankly, incorrect information. And one of the reasons that we're collaborating is to push back on that. Everyone up here on the dais here is committed to high quality, to high level of integrity in the voluntary carbon credit market. That's been defining our work for decades, frankly. Does that mean that we can't be working together for improving it? Quite the contrary. I think one of the tenets of all of our work has also been continuous improvement. We do the best we can, and we being everyone in this room and beyond who wants to participate in the processes and make sure that we get it as best as we can. But in this day and age, there's too much negative press that seems to be dominating the airways, so to speak. And there's a fundamental need to push back on that. And there's a variety of issues that you'll hear from others that we want to address collaboratively to grow this market. And it makes perfect sense to send that signal to the market that there's going to be common criteria for dealing with issues largely around questions of quality. But I'm here to say it, as every other person up here would say, we have been delivering quality to the market. That's our commitment. It's one of the reasons why we're all collaborating with the ICVCM. I've already told folks before that whether you like the ICV-SIM or not is rather immaterial. This is an international effort to try to bring a standardized improvement to a market that needs to scale by orders of magnitude. And we're all committed to that. That's one of the reasons why we're collaborating, maybe the fundamental reason. And as I've said, if something like the ICV-SIM doesn't succeed, we're going to waste a few years waiting for the next attempt to bring more rationality to this market. And as we heard from Chairman Benham this morning, the carbon markets are fundamentally an emerging commodity market, much like many other type of commodity markets, and we should expect and deserve the same level of scrutiny and guardrails for how we're going to conduct our business. Those of us up here understand the details of this market perhaps better than anyone, and we're working on key elements of how we run our programs and how we bring carbon credits to market. And the fundamental message we want to send to everybody is quality is being delivered now, and we're going to continue to improve that to make sure that high quality credits are recognized and available in the market at a much higher level of magnitude than we're seeing today.
Great, thank you. Mary, what are the main objectives of this collaboration? Can you lay some of those out?
Sure. Thanks, David. Well, first, I also want to agree with Craig that even though there hasn't been a formal collaboration such as we've set forth in this joint statement and a well-crafted idea of the kinds of things that we want to achieve, we have been working together. Even more than a decade ago, most of us were part of an initiative called the Offset Quality Initiative. And the Offset Quality Initiative was all of us sitting around to talk about how are we all going to commonly define additionality, how do we quantify it, all the kinds of things that are fundamental tenets, and put forward so we could build trust in carbon markets, right? And ultimately, even if every country in the world were on track to meet its NDCs, which they're not, but even if they all were on track to meet their NDCs, we're still 24 billion tons short of Paris climate targets by 2030, 24 billion tons. There is no way to bridge that gap except for carbon markets. And what we saw in Dubai with the further delay of 6.4, so the general CDM crediting mechanism, makes our role even more important. And as independent crediting programs, we need to be able to step up and help countries achieve their NDCs, working with existing, don't recreate the wheel, don't start your own program. We have staff, we've been doing this for decades, and we want to be able to come and go into countries and help them. How do you use our crediting programs in your own domestic compliance markets, in your own domestic non-compliance markets, towards carbon taxes, ETS, the way that Singapore is doing, et cetera. So really the idea is how do we work together to harmonize some basic things around disclosure, quantification, how we're dealing with the risk of reversal. These are common things. We're all dealing with it, so let's put our heads together, learn from each other, right, and really scale our impact. We need speed and we need scale, and we're here to help countries achieve their NDCs.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Sarah, what have been some of the reactions to this collaboration?
Yeah, thanks. When we put out the statement in Dubai and had the event, I think there was a lot of enthusiasm. Maybe we can hear from the audience whether that you share that view, and then a few misconceptions. So I'll maybe add a little color commentary on where we've seen the most interest. Some of have already been mentioned, and then maybe do a little bit of myth busting. I think, it's important to remember like where we came from. There's an absence of, carbon pricing economy-wide, so standards like ours have all kind of arisen to innovate, bottom up, and try to compete in a way. I mean, this is a market after all. I think there's some healthy competition. But then there's also some places where we've just done things differently because we have been independent programs where standardization and harmonization can really help. So I think some of the things that I've heard a lot of interest in is around some data standards, digital interoperability. Because if we are going to scale, there really needs to be a seamless way to transfer data, to have common data standards, to be able to integrate with meta registries, with exchanges, with national registries, et cetera. So you can really, build liquidity and fungibility where it's appropriate. Gold Standard did some work on this, and we had participation from other standards bodies through an open collaboration we did under a Google grant, looking across the carbon crediting value chain, upstream and digital MRV, open APIs, kind of the middleware, as well as on the demand side, digital assets. So I think that creates some kind of base that we can continue collaborating on and having some of that interoperability moving forward. So that's one. I think sometimes it's just taxonomies. I happen to have someone working on my team, and I know there's some people out in the community that are looking at data aggregation across all of our registries, and they struggle to say, is this methodology comparable? I can't tell from the way it's named. So I think there's some quick wins on just some taxonomy on methodologies, some of the indicators that we use beyond carbon. I also think managing risk, both around durability, around and reversals, around political risk, can be very useful to streamline across our various standards. And then, as Mary said, operationalizing Article 6, helping countries really have the information that they need to be able to assess how the VCM can work in their compliance markets and help them meet and achieve their NDCs. I think that's a huge opportunity. The misunderstandings. You mentioned that in Dubai there was a kind of end-to-end value chain beyond just the crediting, as how it's used, how it's accounted for, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, SBTI, et cetera. And I think there was a lot of expectation that that's already kind of signed, sealed, and delivered, and that there's clear alignment on all of that, and I think that's a longer-term play. But I think it's also an opportunity for us to work together to clarify that. And then the last one, I think, there was some indication or some conjecture that, does this mean that there's not is there a meta standard? Are we all going to be merging? And then going back to the original point, the answer is obviously no. But I think there's, as I mentioned, we've talked about a lot of opportunities for harmonization, but really keep that healthy competition at the service of creating a race to the top and achieving more impact. From Gold Standard's perspective, we've always had a mission alignment for catalyzing more development impact, removing barriers for market access in LDCs. So I think that's great for our respective programs to be innovating within our kind of niches and then harmonizing where possible.
Fantastic, thank you. So Toby, you get the hard question. We worked for a long time, so I figured I'd save the hard one for you. So how's it going? Have you made any progress? And what can you tell us about where you guys are now in this collaboration?
Thanks, David. Well, great to be here. Thanks for all coming. It's a really powerful collaboration, and as has been said, we've been working together with all the crediting programs for many years on many initiatives, but this is the first time we're doing something so formalized and structured, and it's so needed. As we all know, it's been a rough year for the market last year, and one of the bright spots for me is that has helped bring together different market actors, different bedfellows to actually collaborate and realize what's at stake here and what we need to do to get to that 10x plus of market growth. And this initiative, I think, is a great example of that. This was really kicked off in Dubai. So November, December, we had a lot of meetings with and discussions about what this collaboration could look like, and that was when it was launched. Had a follow-up meeting early this year to define the priority areas, to get more specific. And we scoped out now the initial activities and are finalizing the work plan now and the scope of collaboration. So, what it's really going to look like, how we're going to work together, what we're going to prioritize. And then how the work will be done is through working groups that are going to be set up for each of the priority areas. And that's where our respective staff will come together to actually roll up their sleeves to figure out and address and align on some of these core issues. And there's no doubt, that collectively these organizations and other crediting programs, but have an immense deep bench in terms of expertise and experience to really grapple with these issues and figure out everything from alignment of quantification, data methods, safeguards, permanence, we've all been working on those issues for a very long time, and now is the time to kind of compare notes, really, and see what we've learned, where the common basis and foundation should be that we can all agree on, and bring consistency and harmonization and more confidence in the market. And then other areas where we can all continue to innovate and show and offer different pathways for implementation to project actors and other market participants. In terms of timing, we expect the first work products and work streams to be completed in Q3 of this year. And then a lot of the more complicated pieces of work will be ongoing and start to deliver results at the end of the year and into 2025.
Fantastic. That's a great overview of kind of what the whole thing is. I want to get into some of the details. So you mentioned, Toby, Q3, first deliverables, or some more complicated stuff. It'll take a longer time. But my understanding is that this is all embedded within the COP presidency. So are there timelines and timeframes that the COPs requiring, or the presidents of the COP are requiring you to deliver over time, and what those might be? And will there be another stage, another moment at the next COP where you guys will stand together and say, here's what we've accomplished, or this is where we're going?
I mean, certainly the next COP will be the big one, so 1 year out, and I think that's a great milestone for us to be able to show some progress, concrete deliverables, and continue some of the deeper meetings. There's no doubt that in this age of virtual worlds and virtual work, it's a great opportunity as we come together, whether it's these conferences, whether it's the UN COPs. And so I think there'll also be some good coming together of actual development that happens there, as well as announcements. I don't know if others have other milestones around the UN to share.
Well, I think part of it also is us coming together to be able to feed into the ICVCM process, right? So when we can come ahead of time and think about what are the things that we want to bring to the table that we can have a collective voice on, a unified voice on, that's going to help that process go more smoothly. And that's an ongoing process, right? And so feeding into that, it's not a milestone per se, but feeding into that is something that we're also really intent on doing.
Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I think our biggest opportunity in the coming weeks, since we've just put together a draft work plan, and there are many things that we could do, is to pick the the low-hanging fruit but highest impact that we can deliver by COP, and that's just not clear yet. I think one of the realities that we need to be really frank about is that there are a lot of demands on the crediting programs at the moment, just with a really dynamic market, changing policy context, ICVCM, CORSIA. Our small teams are busting at the seams to cope, and so I think the focus is going to be the biggest opportunity, and we should have clarity in the next weeks on what our priorities would be for COP.
So you mentioned a few things. I'll pick up on some things that you said, Sarah. But you mentioned some options which seemed like low-hanging fruit, right? The interoperability, the data availability, and there's some more complicated stuff like managing risk, which I imagine is going to take a bit longer. So how are you guys thinking about how to prioritize the activities and how to set out something that's compelling enough that shows some progress by COP? It certainly won't be the whole kit and caboodle. How are you guys thinking about that?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
From the guy who hasn't read the work plan?
Our host.
The guy who has yet to review the work plan is going to answer that. And frankly, that's just to carry on with what Sarah said. We are definitely committed to this process. We are working in collaboration with the COP presidency because they've made support for the VCM a critical component of COP28, and that responsibility continues through COP29. But we're not answering to them. It is a collaborative effort, and I suspect that this is definitely going to continue past COP29. I think in terms of trying to just determine what we can do in the short term will be around, frankly, critical issues that the ICVCM is also struggling with. And Mary made this point, but as did I, about the importance of it. Again, we're not answering to the ICVCM, but everyone should understand that the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market has taken on a huge responsibility to figure out how to clarify to market participants what integrity means and how we're going to scale this market moving forward. And no one should be under any illusions that they have all the answers. We have committed, to work with them. We've all applied for ICVCM accreditation, but it is a collaborative process, and I certainly hope that give and take continues in the months and years to come. It needs to. It needs to be that interactive. It needs to involve, many of you, and I think, questions around, how to think about the potential use of insurance, for example, in lieu of a buffer pool is something that is on a lot of people's minds. Whether we accomplish that or not, there's a lot of pros and cons going either direction, as just one example. Sarah also mentioned, the problem where apparently either methodologies from one program to the next have different titles but are essentially the same protocol, or they clearly are the same, and they're coming up with different answers. We are definitely committed to tackling that issue, because the market needs to have confidence that the quantification methods and the underlying integrity is going to deliver the same answer, for the same project. So again, we haven't defined yet what exactly those near-term deliverables are, but we're well aware that we've got to have some interim accomplishments, by Q3 and beyond, and despite the limited size of many of our staff, I want to remind people, for example, the Climate Action Reserve is 25 people, and we do have day jobs. So that's not intended to be an excuse. It's just a reality check of how much we can commit to. We're just a little over 3 months removed from COP28, and I think we've made a lot of progress, and we're dedicated to continuing that in the months to come.
Great. Can I just see a show of hands of people who have questions? Get a sense? You got some? Okay, great. I'll come back to you guys in a bit. Just wanted to get a sense, but get them ready. So one of the other greenhouse gas program who's not here is the Global Carbon Council, who's part of this agreement. But there are a number of other standards that are currently in the market and kind of emerging standards. What was the decision? How was that made? Why did you guys get to sit at the table and not the other guys?
I'll take that one. Yeah. We decided that in terms of we use the ICAO CORSIA approval as the benchmark, the programs that are approved by ICAO, because to have achieved ICAO approval, we had to have met a lot of these similar governance and infrastructure and credit criteria, and that was a good starting point. First, global compliance market, and we're all, the 6 of us, minus Global Carbon Council, who's not here tonight. So that was the rationale, and I guess we certainly would welcome the input of other crediting programs, and we have been talking with several of those, and we'll engage them in the process, but we felt that we needed to keep the tent kind of small and draw that fence around it based on the ICAO approval for starting, and then we'll see how things move forward.
Mm-hmm. Great. And just to say, we're all here, mission-driven NGOs that kind of have a very strong commitment to climate action and sustainable development. And, we operate in similar ways, and so it makes it easier for us to sort of start to roll up our sleeves, and we all have a history of working together, so we felt, given limited resources and time, it was important to start with something meaningful and then build from there. But as Mary says, absolutely, it's great to include the others, engage with the others, and we want to and expect to be doing that.
And just maybe show us a little bit about what does it mean. I mean, several of you have referred to the fact that you've got limited bandwidth. But just, can you describe what the process is like? Because I think that's something that, isn't always appreciated. Like, people just think, oh, they're going to collaborate, they're going to come up with something, and it's off to go. But can you just describe what it means to collaborate? What are the intricacies and the day-to-day of a collaboration? And just kind of walk us through that so folks can get an appreciation for the fact that this may not be as complicated, as easy as it might seem.
Well, I think that's a question we could throw out to probably everyone in this audience. think about your day jobs, and if you're asked to join some type of task force, whether it's within your organization or, in this case, it's collaboration among different organizations, you've got to figure out, the mundane details of who you're going to assign to that, how much time are you going to allocate it to it, and what's your timeline for getting it done, and a variety of other questions. And I'm sure that as each of you will conclude, it's not something where you just snap your fingers and it happens overnight. That's not to say that it's necessarily a difficult thing to accomplish, because we're committed, to the continuous improvement in the VCM. But no one should be making this commitment flippantly, or just saying, oh, we're going to fix this, these 10 things in this short order. As I said at the outset, we feel very confident that we've been delivering quality to the market for a very long time and intend to continue to do so. Sometimes that's on a collaborative basis, but we also do compete. I mean, I love these guys, but we compete, and that's not going to change anytime in the near future. So it's in light of all the other time pressures on our day-to-day work. We still have to keep our programs running. We're still developing new protocols. There's new opportunities out there. At the end of the day, one of the overall objectives that we all share is the need to scale this market, and that doesn't, what this collaborative process is a key component of that, but it's only one part of it as well. There's a lot of things that we all do individually that help lead to that scale, and that's not going to change.
Yeah, and David, maybe just to add, oh, sorry, Mary, did you?
Go ahead.
Just to add, because, Craig mentioned competition. I think one of the arts of making this a success and how we engage as working groups, et cetera, is really figuring out what does the market need and want to see where there is harmonization or integration or alignment, versus where are areas where actually innovation and healthy competition is helpful and drives kind of new ideas, optionality in the market, different ways of scaling. So I think that's part of the work, is really to identify where the pain points and the barriers and the risks and challenges in the market are that can be solved through harmonization, and then other areas which can be differentiated amongst ourselves, and that takes some working through, of course.
So I was actually going to say, I don't think of any of you as competitors. I really don't. And to the extent that what we're trying to do together is grow the pie, we could, each one of us, quadruple our output, right, our issuance volumes and everything else, and still not be anywhere near meeting the demand. So for me, that's really the objective, is to scale the market, grow that pie, and we all have our different areas of expertise, our own niches, whether it's geographic or methodological or whatever, right? So I think that we're growing the pie. And by doing it together, we're showing everybody that when we welcome other people to come in and other crediting programs and just keep growing that pie to meet that. We're trying to meet Paris Agreement climate targets, right? And we need all of us times 10 to do that. So.
No, that was very well said. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
That's our kumbaya moment, I think.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and I think, Mary, that's what we all saw last year, right? Is when the market or when the actors got sort of sharp elbows, or it was throwing rocks or trying to carve out their own piece at the expense of the larger whole, stuff starts to unravel, and so much of our space is underpinned by confidence and trust. And as you say, we all care deeply about 10x, 50xing this market. It's critical, and the only way we're going to do that is actually to work together to create a really big pie. And it's with everyone in here too. It's this ecosystem, and that's what we're trying to do with the collaboration, is actually create more connective tissue with the ecosystem. So financial players, data providers, rating agencies, indigenous groups in the Global South on safeguards, that they can actually interact with the standards and contribute and actually start to scale to the vision you're talking about.
No, it's nicely put. Thank you. So we'll maybe go to questions. Do we have a roving mic somewhere? Yeah, great, fantastic. We got one right here. Please, when you have your question, please identify yourself and the institution you represent.
Hi, my name is Klaus Geiger. I work with South Pole. I'm a forester, a former verifier, and now on the project development space. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today was that, first of all, I fully support the calls for and drive towards higher integrity, higher quality projects and credits. I also believe that it's incumbent upon the registries to increase or improve accessibility of the standards and registries for everyone. If we're going to grow the pie, then it has to be available for smallholders, for instance. Something that's top of mind for me is that ratcheting up requirements can end up locking out smaller players. And I think a good example of this are the types of co-certifications that some of the methodologies require. For instance, IFM methodologies requiring FSC or SFI or American Tree Farm, when in some cases those same certifications go above and beyond what the carbon methodologies actually require for things like stakeholder consultation or a number of other requirements. So I think that in terms of registry collaboration, you guys might also care to look beyond the carbon world and think about how these co-certifications, might say if you are FSC certified, you automatically meet this requirements if you are in good standing with them. And I think the best example of that is actually Gold Standard. The AR methodology has exactly the dual certification option. Otherwise, I think what we end up risking is similar to if you're job hunting and you're required to submit your resume, but then you end up also having to enter all your job data in fields one by one. It feels redundant and unnecessary. So any thoughts about that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Great question about maybe, is it really about kind of simplifying the process, making sure we don't make it too complicated, or is it more specifically about the double certification option?
I'd speak to both if you.
Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you said, Gold Standard does recognize FSC for safeguards and other, dimensions of project design. It's really important not to recreate the wheel, both in, new standards in countries that can't be expected to develop their own standards when it's taken our programs 15 years to get to where we are, nor if a good tool exists, let's recognize it. So I for sure agree with you. It exists in the AR portfolio Gold Standard. We've also taken the approach to include SDG verification, certification as part of one single process, so not making that all streamlined. In addition, this is kind of beyond carbon markets, but something that we're looking at is in kind of scope 3, sustainable commodities is how we work. We're an ICL member. So ICL is kind of the standard of sustainability standards, so FSC, Fair Trade, MSC are other ICL standards, is to embed greenhouse gas quantification and MRV into their processes. So they already have a lot of the procedural, sound processes in place, but can you get that, ton of cotton to have a lower emissions factor? So in that case, we wouldn't be adding we'd be embedding our processes into theirs. And then finally, on the removing barriers, especially for smallholders, I think this is really critical. It's there are different geographies where carbon finance hasn't really penetrated well. Africa has been one. Fortunately, we've seen increases there, and that's been a focus for Gold Standard. But yeah, I think how we can aggregate smallholders in a way that's efficient, and you can manage variance in data and the monitoring burden is a big opportunity. It's a challenge, but I think that's something that we should focus on in the future as well.
If I could add, I agree with the objective you're highlighting here, that there's a need to get smaller projects into the program at all levels. It's a discussion we've had many times over the years, and I wish I could tell you I've got a silver bullet to solve that problem. But at the end of the day, we've got to deliver that integrity to the market. Now, Sarah mentioned one possibility is aggregation, and I think a lot of us have looked at that. We include that in our soil enrichment protocol. But it's hard not to deny the facts when you look at who's participating. It tends to be the folks that are, the bigger guys, deeper pocketed. And how do you bring, the smaller projects into market without lowering that quality standard. It's an ongoing discussion. We have very public discussions about that. It depends on what type of source category you're trying to target with your protocol. But we certainly, welcome input from a variety of players into that. I think there are areas that look very promising to lower verification costs, reliance on, Landsat imaging or LiDAR or whatever it might be, and new potential technologies coming all the time that can lower that barrier. But as I said, there's no silver bullet, and at the end of the day, the end result has to be make sure the quality. You certainly can't lower the quality standard simply to get smaller folks into the market. That is not a point that some participants necessarily appreciate. We have stakeholders all the time that say, this is a poor ejido in Mexico, they can't afford that, can't we do something? And we'll look at it, but you can't just lower the standard because you want them to play in the program. That's not acceptable.
Just to add, I do think technology has a huge potential role to play in that in terms of reducing costs, increasing access, and so forth. The more we can standardize our processes and our quantification approaches and use remote sense data, field data, but other simple ways to pull in information, DMRV, for example, without needing a lot of kind of expert input or global north, consulting bodies or validation and verification bodies and reviewers. I think that'll go a long way, but we need to simplify on our end, and I know we're all working on that. We need to standardize to the extent we can, and then I think we need to leverage technology to kind of help and align with other standards, as you say, not reinvent the wheel, think of where duplication can be removed, et cetera.
There's one other issue that we should address. We've been dealing with a lot of chicken little critics in this market that have an inordinate influence on what's happening in the VCM. It's not to say that we're not open, for criticism, but they're getting an inordinate amount of press. They have some of the media that will back them up on it. They're not necessarily engaging in the process, and as long as those spurious claims are allowed to carry the day in a news cycle, it makes it very difficult to try out new techniques to utilize smaller landowners, smaller project developers, et cetera. And I think one of the hoped for objectives is to bring more clarity to what those criticisms are, when they have merit, and just as importantly, when they do not. And let me be clear, it's not that we're objecting to concerns being raised about potential quality of credits. Bring that on, but people have to bring it on in a constructive way and not just sitting on the outside, looking at the work that we're doing and saying it's fundamentally flawed. I mean, I liken it to, these critics see a car with a taillight out and they tell you got to go get a new car. It never occurs to them to maybe fix the taillight. That's an overly simplistic example, but that's really what we're dealing with right now. And we know that there's a lot of quality there, but there's a lot of market participants or potential market participants, many companies, who just can't make that differentiation now, and that's not acceptable. We have to bring that clarity.
Question to you and the panel. Do you think you could test some new theories of how to streamline things by this collaboration? So you could come up with some maybe streamlined ways that maybe criticize if they're done by an individual one of you, but maybe may hold water if you actually do it together?
I mean, one obvious area that I know is near and dear to your heart, David, is standardized methods, where, like, if you think about additionality on a project-by-project basis, it's very fraught. It's hard to define, hard to assess, and costly, challenging on all fronts. And now there's a lot of data and project examples and tools that can be used and leveraged to start to standardize how we assess additionality in different sectors and create things like performance benchmarks, both for additionality and for potentially baseline setting. That takes a lot of resources and energy, and I know you're taking great leadership in trying to think of some next generation ways we could do this as an industry, as a sector. But that's really benefits from coming together, because you can compare the data, you can compare the methods, you can see, like, in practice where, how you can make something workable but that maintains and scalable, that maintains integrity. So I think that's an obvious one for me.
Great. Other questions? Right here. Raise your hand, one back there. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Takashi Hongo, Mitsui Global Statistics Strategy Institute, as well as ITA board members. Thank you very much for the very nice explanation. I have two questions, please. Both questions refer to the previous question. First question is at the COP28, the joint statement on voluntary carbon market that was a proposal by EU climate change ministers' proposal. What kind of impact expected on the voluntary market? Because we are discussing about complexity of the due diligence of the issuing credit. So that statement will provide a negative impact on the streamlining of the process or not. I would like to hear your views. And the second question is from buyer point of views. Small scale project or small emitters, the contribution to the global decarbonization. But however, the small emitter, if they will receive the revenue from credit, very small, very minor. So in that case, another idea, like how can I say, the price of the carbon will be up. In that case, the upside profit can be shared by the owner of the reduction, particularly the small scale emitter. If such a thing would be there, that would be a very big bonus to the small scale emitter, and they are willing to participate in the carbon market. So is there any idea about sharing the price up by the original emitters?
Great. Thank you, Takashi. So, two questions. One about the impact of the announcement by the EU, and the second one about what do you see? Is there any role for the small? I think the small enterprises, and whether there's anything you can do about anything you will do that have an impact on price that would bring them onto the market.
Yeah, once the price will be up, the upside profit will be shared by original, the emitters.
Okay. Where do you want to take a crack at that?
Well, I'll start with the last one, Takashi. One of the items that's in our joint collaboration is looking at best practices for benefit sharing. So that's part of our work plan, and we intend to survey the market, find out what those best practices are, and decide how we will incorporate those into our program. And certainly the suggestion you're making of sharing upside, that may be something that is a best practice when we go back and look at that work.
Can I clarify that the statement that you're referring to is the one by a number of EU countries, not from the European Commission, around like claims, specifically on claims, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that that statement could have been received negatively, but I think it really is just underscoring the transition that's been happening for the past few years, where it's a pivot from a binary world of carbon offsetting, carbon neutral, to one of making more nuanced claims around beyond value chain mitigation, for example. So I think it's pretty much in line with where the direction of travel has been, and we're hearing from other regulations in various countries, including in the U.S. here. So I actually see, I read that as a positive statement that those governments were encouraging their private sector to take responsibility for their unabated emissions, but just to be very cautious with the claims. And I think that's, I think if we could, as an industry, in liaising with civil society, embrace that, I think that should be the common sheet of music that we sing from when we advise the corporate sector on how they should be expected to be accountable for their emissions.
I'd also like to follow on from Mary's answer to the second part of your question. She's absolutely right. There are things that we can do, and that's one of the reasons we're collaborating to help drive confidence in the market, which will enhance prices. But I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that the carbon registry programs are somehow setting price or having anything to do with that price setting. We are here to issue high-quality credits and to allow the market to decide what the pricing should be. It's surprising how maybe that's obvious to all of you. It hasn't been obvious to a number of the international organizations proposing fixes to this market, where there have been express suggestions that we should be setting prices, we should be setting aside a certain amount of proceeds. We don't deal in the buying and selling of credits. We simply issue the imprimatur of quality so the credits can be transacted.
Great. There's a question back there.
Yeah, hi, Ariel Hayward from Microsoft. Quick question. Well, first of all, thank you for the work that you do. It's incredibly important and often very thankless. And so my question is, what do you need from the rest of us in the industry, practitioners, projects, buyers, in order to accelerate the collaboration that I think we all agree we desperately need?
Great question. Be careful what you ask for.
So there may be items on our work plan that require external resourcing. And so we may come to the market for that, and whether that's financial resources or help, just because it's just us. And like Craig said, we all have day jobs. So when we look at this work plan and we're like, oh, now we have to do all these other things. It's our resources internally, but it's also how are we going to pay for this, right? Because some of these things are complex.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also think, as a buyer, we want to hear from you what the biggest concerns you have about participating in the market now. That can help define priorities in the work plan. We're not doing this in a vacuum. If at the end of the day, the buyer community doesn't feel like we've moved the needle, that's not success. And we're not here for failure. We're trying to enhance this market, and as we've described, make sure that we can grow this exponentially in the coming years.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think to the extent buyers can share, open the kimono, as it were, for their due diligence processes and what the pain points are and how they assess projects, because ultimately we're only going to scale the market, if we're as standard setters as program developers are linking into large-scale demand. And that demand now is, and Microsoft's a great example, but many companies have very deep benches and good consultants and other people helping. And we can all learn and benefit from that in a collaborative way. And so I think if it's more of us all in it together, so it's kind of the next concentric circle of collaboration, and it's seen as we're all working together, I think that will be very helpful.
I would just add that we need 10,000 more Microsofts. And we need buyers to be vocal. There's this phenomenon of green hushing, and it just doesn't do anyone any favors. So I think demonstration of best practice and taking accountability using a carbon fee was pioneered by Microsoft, and I think is becoming now a standard, held up as best practice, and taking full responsibility for emissions, talking about it clearly, confidently, and building critical mass, because I think having sufficient demand will reduce so much friction and will enable the market to scale at a just much, much faster pace, because there's so much uncertainty and risks. There's so many people on the, stepping back and waiting. So, clear, full-throated support of high-integrity markets is much appreciated.
I have a question for you guys. You've all mentioned kind of the lack of resources and the need to have to do your day jobs. Have you thought about trying to get some resources from a foundation to get some folks to help you out?
We've thought about it.
There's an idea. Any other questions? Great, we have a few over here. Fantastic.
Hi, I'm Ramana from TrueTerra, so I work in technology space. Is registries are thinking about any common database to track fields? Because one field might be in two different programs, so how to track those fields?
To track fees?
Field boundary.
Oh.
Same field boundary in two different projects and
Field boundary. Field?
Sorry,
field or
field? Sorry.
yeah, field boundaries.
Tree bounding?
Field, F-I-E-L-D.
Geographic location.
Oh,
Field
location.
data.
Yep.
Yeah, so-
Yes, I can say one thing. At Verra, we're developing a project location tool. Actually, it's almost finished. That actually will do that very thing. Will actually identify from the KML files potential overlaps within our system, but then starting to link to other systems so that you can see project area overlaps and address those. And then soon to link to other programs like Scope 3 programs where you might have inventory claims or insets, if you want to use that term, for Scope 3 that are related or could overlap with an offset claim. We're starting to see more and more of that, and as we get more Scope 3 traction and acceleration there, we'll see more and more of that world overlapping, and we just have to make sure that, certainly geographically to begin with, that there isn't any double counting of those emission reductions or removals.
If I could actually go back to the question for Microsoft, because there's one thing, and this is my own personal opinion, haven't discussed this with anyone else, but I think this focus on what companies are doing and whether they're buying questionable credits or not is not fairly addressed to any company. I think you ought to get all the other buyers to say, this is not our responsibility. We're trying to do the right thing. If you want to hold somebody's feet to the fire, it's the ICVCM and it's the crediting programs. And that's fine. That's the service we're in. Happy to take that focus, take that heat. But I just find it ludicrous, having worked with many Fortune 1000 companies, companies have a hard time even devoting the resources to doing a carbon footprint for their operations, including Scope 3, which that's a separate discussion. But on top of that, then they get criticized for actually investing voluntarily in mitigation actions. And it's not their expertise. Why are companies being raked over the coals for that? And again, I'm not defending investment in just really spurious, poor quality credits, but if they're doing a credible job, it's just insane that you're expecting each and every buyer in the market to have that expertise. It's equivalent to every one of you going out and buying a used car, and you buy a lemon, and you get sued because you bought the lemon. That's exactly what's happening to companies out there. And we have to change that modality. And how we do that, I don't know. But Microsoft and others stepping up and saying, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore would help.
Thank you, Craig. There's one more question over here.
Thanks, David. Ralph Strebel, Greenhouse Gas Management Institute. I'm going to take my NGO hat off and put on my project developer hat and kind of address and ask a question as well. First of all, thank you guys all for giving a great presentation. It's great to see that the standards are working together in this collaborative methods from a development side. That's really nice to see. I guess my question really is about if there's been any thought about, can you standardize baselines, not just methodologies, but could you do something like what Verra is doing with jurisdictional baselines for across all standards? For a developer, the effort to create a baseline, the uncertainties with creating baselines, it's a big part of the project, and to take that part out of the equation, it could allow smaller projects to come on stream easier, it could streamline the process, but it would also potentially create more certainty in the market because everybody's using the same baseline. So I'm just wondering if there's been any thinking or potential about creating that sort of approach across standards.
Good question.
I can speak, thanks Ralph, to the Red Plus question at least in terms of standardized baselines. There's huge potential there. You're absolutely right. To date, it's been very fragmented and opaque, which also speaks to small projects not being able to participate. It speaks to integrity challenges because people can't assess the quality of a given baseline, et cetera, or not easily. So what we're doing with the new Red Plus, or the Red methodology, for example, and we were just discussing this a couple of days ago, is going to be publishing which takes basically, for those that you don't know, a jurisdictional approach, so looking at deforestation rates and risk, and basically then allocating that to project areas. So it's a top-down approach rather than bottom-up, project-by-project reference region approach that's been followed to date. So it'll be quite revolutionary in terms of this approach, but in terms of how we can do what you're talking about to help the data be more widely available, to support projects, create more transparency, et cetera. We will be publishing the forest cover and benchmark maps for all of these countries as they're developed, which will be starting in 3 months, going on for the next 18 months, so covering most of the world where REDD+ happens. So projects can see, historic data, what they'd be looking at as a baseline, and then also the risk maps to show actually area by area where the highest threats or the biggest emission reduction potential lies. And we think that's going to be really exciting because it will allow project developers and countries to identify areas that may not currently have project activities that could use carbon finance to implement reduced deforestation activities and get a significant, get an attractive baseline from the outset. So we think that'll help with a lot of these issues.
Fantastic. Any evidence of that approach being considered for other sectors? Or is this too early to tell?
I think with standardized methods, it's possible, right? With performance benchmarks and agreeing on common data sets. And I should say, in terms of collaboration, also working with Leaf and ACR, to sort of think about jurisdictional and nested REDD. So how do the scales fit together? I think that's going to be increasingly important. The interplay between government actions, jurisdiction policy, and additionality, regulatory surplus around that. How do projects fit in and contribute to those NDCs and government objectives, as well as site-specific objectives? And then how do you link that to corporate actions in their supply chains? And I think that's going to be the next wave of collaboration and integration. And that it gets complicated, but it's where I think a lot of the big scaling is going to happen.
Fantastic. So we're almost at the end. I'm going to do a final lightning round set of questions for each one of you. I'm assuming that each one of you have some feelings about what you'd like to see come out of this. If you had a magic wand, you have to say one thing that comes out of this collaboration. What would it be?
Scale.
Appreciation. I think that's one word.
I like scale. That's the objective.
All of those plus increased market access, particularly in the developing world.
Fantastic. Well, we've had, I think, a really interesting conversation. We've gone from, really understanding a bit more about what's behind this collaboration, what it really means on the ground and in real life, the challenges that you guys face. But certainly it's an interesting thing. It's part of the COP presidency. We'll be hearing more about this. We look forward to hearing from you guys on progress. So please join me in thanking the participants here. I think they've done a great job.